I'm really excited right now. Yeah, summer's over, which is kind of a bummer. Time really flew, but that means hockey season is almost there. That means first, it's the Canucks Rookie Showcase up in Penticton, and then we have the training camp, and then we have preseason games, and then before we'll even know it, it'll be October, hockey season will finally start, and today I get to talk about the Canucks prospects, one of the deepest prospect pools in the league. I'm pretty excited. This is by far the deepest prospect pool the Canucks have probably ever seen in their franchise history. I'm saying this in terms of high-end talent and the quantity of prospects that the Canucks possess. Ranking NHL farm systems is in no way a science, and it is not easy. The amount of prospect knowledge you have to have could span at least 300 deep, and there's no way I could do it, but thankfully there have been other outlets like The Athletic, Dover Prospects, The Sporting News that have all tried to power rank the NHL farm systems, and while there's a lot of discrepancy between the ranks, one of the few constants at the top of each and every list is the Vancouver Canucks, and I think that just should show and speak volumes to how good and how deep our prospect pool is. And that has me feeling all kind of ways. So my rankings are based on the type of impact I think that these players can have at the NHL level. When assessing players, I like to weigh IQ, skill, and speed to measure the impact that they could have at the NHL level, and I take into account the size when weighing these attributes. For example, if the player is 6'3" and 220 pounds and he's not that fast, he better make up for that deficit of not being quick by having high skill or high IQ. On the flip side, if you're on the smaller end of the spectrum, well, you better be pretty good in all three areas. With all that being said though, IQ is a must in today's game, and I rate that over everything else. So when talking about goaltenders, I will acknowledge that they're probably one of the most important positions to have in hockey. When you have a good goaltender who's on fire, he can win you games, he can win you series, he can win you Stanley Cups. However, when I'm talking about the impact or the value of a prospect goaltender, I tend to be a little bit more bearish when ranking them, just because I think goalies, they're just so hard to predict, they're so hard to project. By me saying a goalie I think could be a starting goaltender from what I've heard from different sources and from what I've seen, I think that's a big praise, because calling a goaltender elite at such a young age is really, it's not certain at all. Lastly, I'd just like to say I think I know a decent amount about Canucks prospects, but in no way am I a professional. I do this for fun as a side hobby, and most of my opinions come from, if I'm able to watch them, I'll watch them, but a lot of it comes from reading and researching, stuff like that, so take this opinion with a grain of salt. Again, it's just my opinion. If you have a differing opinion and you don't agree with me, please let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear it. I'm always up for new ideas and opinions to help assess where I'm at, just as long as they're thoughtful. So what I've done for my rankings is I've put them in order of what I think are the top prospects all the way down to the bottom prospects, but I've also grouped them into groupings or into tiers. The first grouping I have is the S tier. These are your perennial superstars like Rasmus Dahlin, Austin Matthews level, Jack Eichel, even Connor McDavid and Sidney Crosby go in these tiers, but I think they're a step above as they are generational players. Next we have the A+ tier. These are elite players who will be at the top 10 at their respective positions. We then have the A tier, which are first liners, top pairing guys. These are high-end players that could be top 10 at their position at some point, but not for a majority of their career. They don't have quite the longevity that an elite player would have. Then we have B tier prospects, but they're still fantastic prospects. These are top 6, top 4 starting goalie types, legit prospects who have low-end top-line pairing skill. Next up we have the C tier. These are middle of the lineup guys who can play in a top 6 role but are more suited to the middle of the lineup. With the D tier we have guys that could be something. They have all the tools to play bottom line minutes, but they have a chance to be a bit more than that if all goes well. And lastly, we have the D- tier. These are depth players, low upside guys that won't make a huge impact in the NHL, but can be nice pieces to fill out the bottom of the roster. The Canucks prospects start off in the A+ tier with Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson, two guys who have very good shots at being one of the best in their positions for a majority of their careers. I got a lot of flack for saying that Quinn Hughes is already the best Canucks prospect in the system when we drafted him, and I'm still sticking to my guns now. And really, that's just personal preference to me. I'm not taking anything away from the quality of prospect Elias Pettersson is and the type of season he had in the SHL. What he did last year was historic. He is so smart and so skilled, and he can play with speed even though he doesn't have the best stride. He's going to be a dominant player for the Canucks in the future. While the concerns about his weight and reliance on the power play do hold some merit, I'm not as worried about that as maybe some other people are, just because I think he's such a smart player. He'll learn how to manage that at North American ice on 5-on-5. He'll learn how to play in and around the boards at North American ice with his frame. He's definitely going to be putting on some more weight. You can just tell he has that kind of work ethic. He knows what type of player he is, and he's going to use that to his strengths. He seems like a high character kid, and I think he's going to put it all together. However, if I were to restart a franchise right now and have to build around either Elias Pettersson or Quinn Hughes, I'm taking the latter, and that's why I have him as my #1 prospect. Having someone that can control the game like Quinn Hughes does for over 20 minutes a night is huge. When looking at those attributes that I was talking about earlier, IQ, skill, speed, Quinn Hughes checks off all of those boxes at an elite level. And when you combine all of that into a puck-moving defenseman, teams better watch out, because he's going to be a one-man breakout and zone entry machine. Again, no disrespect to Elias Pettersson, but at the same time, I'm just really happy that we are even having this discussion about these two players. They're both ours! Moving on to the B tier, we'll start with Olli Juolevi, a guy that's sort of taken a different development path from his peers, but nonetheless, he's still looking like a very solid prospect. He had a great first year as a professional in Finland and ended it off with a fantastic playoff performance for his Finnish team. And while I don't think he's going to be a bona fide top pairing defenseman like how the Canucks were hoping when we drafted him, I still think he will be a very solid #3, low #2 guy who's very reliable in his own end, can make a breakout pass, can defend the rush, and can also contribute on the power play in a second unit type. Having Hughes and Juolevi on the left side for years to come just... oh, I'm so excited. Next up, we have Jonathan Dahlin, who put up a massive second year in the Allsvenskan for Timrå, leading his team all the way to SHL promotions. He has the skill to make high-end plays, but I consider him more of a complementary player around the net and down low and along the boards. I think he's actually very strong in that regards, and that transition to North American ice with the way he plays, it might be not as hard of a transition as some others might take it from a European league. His skating is acceptable. I'd even say it's maybe a bit above average, but it could still stand to use some work getting to higher top speeds faster. Adam Gaudette is a great all-around forward with amazing defensive instincts. I already think he plays the defensive game at a pro level. His offense, he has some ceiling there, but it could still use some room for improvement, which is why I have him below Jonathan Dahlin, just as far as offensive impact, but he's right there with him in terms of overall impact that he could have to the Canucks, as he'll be a guy that can play in all situations, on the power play at even strength and on the penalty kill, as well as winning faceoffs. He's going to be a stud middle of the lineup center, especially with our center core of Horvat, hopefully Pettersson, and then Gaudette. And before you freak out about putting Horvat over Pettersson, don't worry, guys. No, Pettersson's #1C. That was just me trying to list off the centers, and I said Horvat first. Don't worry. This brings us to Thatcher Demko, the Canucks' potential and hopeful goalie of the future, who had a solid last year in Utica for his second professional year. He's looking like he has the makings of being a starting goaltender in the NHL. It seems like he has the mental makeup, and he's positionally pretty sound. He does have a bit more work to do, and I wouldn't be opposed to him playing another full year in Utica, but I have a feeling we could be seeing him much, much earlier. Cole Lind is another guy that I think is a very, very well-rounded player. He might not have the highest offensive ceiling regardless of his numbers, but I think he's overall a very solid 200-foot player who can use his body effectively, has speed, has fantastic playmaking vision, and also has now developed a shot off of the rush and along the top of the circles that makes him very deadly, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in Utica this year. To round out the B tier, we have the physical right-handed defenseman Jet Wu out of the Moose Jaw Warriors. And while I don't think his offensive impact will be as big at the NHL level, he does have a bit of an offensive ceiling there. He started off his draft year playing very well in terms of offensively putting up points, was injured, and then came back to Moose Jaw after they had made a couple trades, wasn't put in a position to succeed offensively, but was still one of the top minute munchers for the team in the playoffs, playing a defensive shutdown role, and I think that's going to be very key for the Canucks in the future. Whether or not he's paired with Olli Juolevi or even Quinn Hughes, I think they have a player there. He might not be the most exciting in terms of offense, but with his physicality and his steady, calm pace of play, I think he's going to be a pretty impactful defenseman for the future. He is on the low end of the spectrum, and I contemplated putting him in Tier C, but maybe that would have been a bit better, but he definitely would have been the highest at a Tier C. Speaking of Tier C, we'll start with Petrus Palmu, the stocky fire hydrant out of Finland. My god, I love this guy. Palmu may not have size, but he has size. The lad is girthy. Can I even say that? I'm not sure. Yes, there are concerns with his height, but he doesn't get knocked off the puck very easily. He has a very low center of gravity, and he is strong on his skates, and I think he has the speed, the skill, and the IQ to at least make a mark in the NHL. He looked very good in his first year as a professional in the Liga, and I really enjoyed watching him at the Canucks Summer Prospect Showcase, which isn't really a measure of how good they're going to be, but I do think he plays already a very polished pro game. Very excited to see what he can do in Utica. Lukas Jasic is another guy that's sort of flown under the prospect radar until last year when he joined the Utica Comets at the end of the season and put up more than a point per game in the last 6 games. Jasic has the IQ, vision, and a lethal shot that I think will fit himself very nicely into Utica's top 6, and I'm very excited to see what he can do next year and if he can transition that into the NHL. Now let's talk about Jonah Gadjevich, or as I like to call him, the Manimal. I don't know if that's going to stick. He didn't have quite as an excellent season as some of the other Canucks prospects did last year, and it might have let some people down being a second-round pick. It was still pretty decent, putting over a point per game, and he'd had to deal with a couple injuries, which definitely set him back. He had a very good World Juniors, and I think he doesn't really have too much development to go as far as physical maturity. His game is already pretty polished as far as hockey IQ. He could stand to work on his skills a bit more, but I think he's a decent bet to become a solid third liner, possibly a little bit more. Again, he's more of a complementary piece to a line that has playmakers and snipers, and he can be the kind of guy that retrieves pucks down low, gets in front of the net, and bangs and crashes in the rebounds. And then we have our second goaltender, Michael DiPietro, the OHL goaltender of the year, a guy who plays a lot like Jonathan Quick, not only due to his style, but also his size. Cut from Canada's World Junior Camp last year, he's looking this year to improve upon that and make the team as a starting goaltender in Vancouver, no less. I'm very excited to see how his game has progressed, and from what I've heard from over the summer, it sounds like a lot of his technical movements and just traits and instincts have changed to where he's more of a positionally sound goaltender instead of a less reflexive, athletic goaltender, which really bodes well for becoming a professional when the shots are a bit harder, players are a bit more skilled, things like that. If I can find the interview, Kevin Woodley had a really great piece on how he thought DiPietro's developed since even the end of the season and into summer, into the training camp, when he's worked on some of his technical abilities. If I can find it, I'll link it down in the description. Now we get into the D tier, with Zach McEwen, Jack Rathbone, Guillaume Brisebois, Jalen Chatfield, Matthew Broussard, William Lockwood, Tyler Madden, and Artem Manukyan. McEwen's been a riser for a lot of people following the Canucks as well as the Utica Comets. He came into his first year professionally and had an outstanding year with Utica, putting up 33 points in 60-something games. It sounds like people in the community have a lot of time for McEwen, and I'm very excited to see what he can do to follow up his fantastic rookie year. He doesn't have that offensive ceiling, but he does have the tenacity, the work ethic, the two-way game, and the IQ, and the speed to carve out a very nice bottom six role for himself with a bit of offense. Jack Rathbone is a guy that I cannot wait to watch next year at Harvard in the NCAA, as he's a defenseman who moves the puck quite well, is a great skater, and has a hell of a shot. He's a legitimate offensive defenseman. It's just he's been playing the past 2 years in the high school prep system, so it's been pretty hard to get a gauge on where he's actually at compared to the rest of his peers. This year will be a big year for him. He has an opportunity to crack the top 4 at Harvard, so if he's able to do that, that could be a huge contributing factor to his development. Guillaume Brisebois and Jalen Chatfield are kind of in the same boat for me. They're both low offensive guys who are pretty steady in their own end, good transitionally, are able to break up with the rush coming in from them. Both great skaters. They make the safe play most of the time and the smart play. I think Chatfield may be the better skater, but Brisebois might have a bit better of a shot, and both of them could serve as fine number 6 defensemen for the team in the coming future. Matthew Broussard is an interesting one. In his draft plus 2 year, he put up 50 or 60 points in 70 games, I want to say, almost a point a game player for the Oshawa Generals. He looks like he has the makings of a nice offensive defenseman at the AHL level with his shot and his skating ability and his vision. Whether or not his defensive side of the game is good enough for the NHL is yet to be seen. He could come on as one of those 7th or 6th defensemen who, maybe not even a power play specialist, but who could provide some offense in the lower part of the lineup should his defensive side of the game reach maturity. William Lockwood might be a guy that I'm being a bit too hard on. He could have been in the C tier for me. I believe he was last year, because I do really like his game. He is a wrecking ball. He's one of the fastest skaters the Canucks have in the prospect system. He plays hard each and every night, and he puts his body on the line. For such a small guy, he is not afraid to hit the biggest of them, and he has quite a bit of skill to go along with that speed. Not high-end skill as far as he's able to use his decision-making combined with his skill to make high-end plays, but he definitely has the hands and the shot to put in some pucks in the net at the NHL level. It's just he's been injury-prone the past couple years. I believe he's injured his shoulder twice this year, first at the beginning of the year in college, and then he injured it again, which ended his season at the World Junior Championships playing for Team USA, which is unfortunate. Hopefully his game won't be too hampered by that injury. Hopefully it's healed 100% and he can play worry-free, because that's when he's at his best, when he can play worry-free, throwing the body and skating like the wind. Tyler Madden is another guy who I kind of view maybe Adam Gaudette, Will Lockwood level when we first drafted them. I mean, not much is really known about them since they are coming out of the USHL, going into the NCAA for their freshman year at university. Not a point-per-game player in the USHL, but the skill is there, the character seems like it's there. The skating could use some work on Madden, but he's going to a very good program in Northeastern. A lot of their seniors have graduated, like Dylan Sakura, Adam Gaudette, Nolan Stevens, so there is definitely playing time to be won for Tyler Madden. It's just his opportunity, his choice, if he really wants to go out and grab that. Finally, on the D tier, we have Artem Manukyan, who is an extreme long shot to make the NHL, as I believe he's 5'7" on skates, only 140 pounds. I think he's pretty much my build, and I can't imagine me playing in the NHL at this size. I would get demolished, but he is an extremely skilled player. He is historically the best player to come out of the MHL, that's the junior hockey league in Russia, as he's I think he's the only player to ever put up 100 points in a season at the MHL. This year he'll be going into his second year playing in the KHL. Last year he only put up 2 points in 24 games at the KHL level, so this year he'll be looking to build upon that. And who knows? I mean, I love the pick. The Canucks just really swung for the fences. If there is something there, then that's free money for a 6th round pick. And if not, really, I like the effort there. And lastly, to round out the Canucks prospects, we have the D- tier with Evan McEnany, Ashton Sautner, Tanner McMaster, Dmitry Jukinev, Tony Uutinen, and Matthew Thiessen. McEnany and Sautner could both carve out NHL careers, as Sautner looked pretty good in his 5 or 6 game stint with the Canucks at the end of last year. Plays a solid defensive game, but doesn't put up much offense, so yeah, he could be a very solid number 7 guy. Same thing with Evan McEnany, who could put up a bit more offense than that, as he had, I believe, 7 points in 11 games for the Utica Comets last year before having a career-ending injury. Tanner McMaster is a guy that I'm very curious about to see how he does this year, as he signed after his QMJHL season wrapped up with the Utica Comets and put up pretty good numbers in his final 10 or so games. He has some skill. I don't think it's really that much more than to be a bottom line forward, but he definitely, I think, has a shot at potentially playing some NHL games in his career. Dmitry Jukinev is a guy who's interesting. He's pretty much very much a long shot to make the NHL at this point. He's playing in the KHL this year with Artem Manukyan on the same team. His game apparently is more of a two-way forward, which could lend some assistance to him making the NHL in a bottom 6 role, and he does have some offensive output. It's just we haven't really seen the progression that you'd like to see out of a player, and hopefully he can have a bigger year this year in the KHL. Tony Uutinen I have here, who I actually do have a lot of time for. I really like his game, but I just don't see a lot of offensive output from him, which is why I have him in this D tier. D- tier, I do think he could carve out an NHL career as a bottom pairing defenseman. I just think just the fact due to his age, he's such an unknown and not a lot of offense there. While I do like his game, I like his skating, I like his decision making, and I like his defensive play. This is why I have him in the D- tier. And the final prospect that I'll be talking about is Matthew Thiessen, who will be going to the USHL next year and then on to the NCAA for most likely 3 or 4 years. So he's got a 4 or 5 year development time schedule at least before he becomes a professional, which is really more power to him. Sounds great for a goalie for pretty much all goalies. From what I've heard, it sounds like he's a high character guy from some of the things that I've read, and it seems like next year at his USHL team, he'll have a very good relationship with his goaltending coach, who he's known since he was a youngster. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know by leaving a like, as it really helps me out knowing if I'm doing stuff right or wrong. And if you're new to the channel, please consider hitting subscribe and joining all of us on this Canucks journey. If you disagreed with any of my opinions or agreed, I'd love to hear it down in the comment section below. I'm always, as I said, I'm always up for new ideas and new opinions, as long as they are thoughtful. The season is almost here. I can't wait for the Canucks showcase, or the prospect showcase up in Penticton. I can't wait to see all the storylines coming out of training camp, and then I can't wait for preseason, and then the season to start. Oh, is it October yet? So with that, I will leave you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Stay calm, keep your head in a swivel, and have a great day.